Voltron, Defender of the Universe.
Kids growing up in the 80s had a special spot on their schedule at 4 o'clock right after they got home because there was something on TV they absolutely didn't want to miss. Yep, I'm talking about Voltron, the show with 5 lion robots, one blazing sword that I very badly wanted to be mine, and understandably, like everyone else, I was kind of obsessed with it. This show, Voltron, Defender of the Universe, came out in September of 1984, and it became one of the most watched children's shows back then. The theme song is still buried in my skull like a sleeper agent code, you know, but here's the thing. That show that we grew up watching was actually a revamp of another show, but at the same time, it was also something completely different. You see, World Events Productions licensed 2 entirely unrelated series, Beast King Golion from 1981 and Armored Fleet Die Rugger 15 from 1982, right? And then they spliced them together by systematically removing everything they knew the American audience and broadcasters wouldn't like. Literally, the story editor, Mark Handler, has been very candid about what they did. He said, and I quote, "Anything that we knew a broadcaster would cut, we had to cut." So basically, what I'm trying to say is that the Voltron that you grew up with was actually just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more that was never even touched, and today we're going to go through it, and when you see it, I promise you, you cannot unsee it. Earth was already dead and nobody told you. So, Golion's story was set back in 1999, right? You've got 5 pilots returning from a deep space mission, and once they get back, they find out that World War III had already happened. The Earth they know, it's gone forever. Tokyo is basically rubble. The human population has been wiped clean, and this is the opening scene, guys. We get zero filler before we're shown with the 5 planets, the dead planet, and the fact that there's nothing left to return to. Voltron, understandably, erases that. Instead, the pilots become Galaxy Garrison astronauts who are dispatched from a healthy and functioning Earth. The ruined city footage we see in Golion? Yup, that's just repurposed in the American version using shots from Die Rugger 15, and now we see that this is another planet ravaged by Zarkon's forces. Earth is fine, and we've got a villain to deal with. This change completely reverses the show's entire premise. While Golion was this post-apocalyptic survival story, with the lion robots being the last meaningful hope for what survives, Voltron, instead, is all about that Cold War logic. Earth is a good place, and there are heroes out there fighting the evil so that Earth remains a good and happy place. When Golion's pilots defend the people of Altea, there's a desperation to it, because this is all they have left. In Voltron, the pilots are doing this because it's the right thing to do. They're both good people, but you just know it's not the same thing. The Galra Empire wasn't evil, it was a slave state. The Galra Empire in Golion conquered planets, yes, but it also processed them. All the survivors from destroyed worlds were sorted into either forced labor or gladiatorial arenas, and Golion didn't play easily with these tones and messages. They depicted this with genuine bluntness, and in episode 38, we see the fighters competing within a time limit to execute as many prisoners as possible. Now, obviously, WEP wasn't going to do that, so instead, the enemy troops are reclassified as robot warriors in the English audio. The slaves become captives, the arenas become monster fight venues. The Robeasts end up becoming this weekly boss format with no human connection. As a result, the planet Doom we get in Voltron feels generic and menacing, while Die Bazal's empire in Golion feels like a functioning system of oppression. There's something so visceral and gut-wrenching about the villains in the Golion series, because you can truly see this happening in our very real history. So it kind of makes sense why Voltron chose to edit that out, because Voltron was aiming for a child audience, even if it meant sacrificing the ideological spine of the show. Voltron itself used to be the villain. Golion was punished by a goddess. After centuries of victories, Golion grew so arrogant in his power that he actually challenged the goddess of the universe herself to combat. Understandably, this resulted in her disassembling him into 5 lion robots and scattering them across space. So, from the get-go, you know that his existence is a humbling experience. It's a consequence of his own pride. But then, in Voltron, we see Hagar cast a spell and then the robot splits, and the 5 heroes we have, they put him back together. The moral, that actions have consequences, that pride can backfire, was a big part of what made Golion compelling, and it got chucked. You gotta admit, the religious dimension of a literal goddess punishing arrogance is really cool, but this would almost certainly not work for American broadcasters in 1984, and with this change, the central argument about power that was present in Golion, the whole concept that even the mightiest force in the universe had to be broken and then reassembled to be trusted again, is gone. Sven didn't go to a hospital planet, he died. In the 6th episode of Golion, Takashi Shirogane, the pilot that the American audiences knew as Sven, is mortally wounded in a fight with Honerva and her Robeast, and he dies a hero. The team grieves and Princess Fala eventually takes over his lion. Then, later in the series, we see his younger brother Rio show up to fight in his honor. Realistic and hella sad, right? Then we have Voltron. Here we learn that Sven is hurt and is headed to a hospital planet to recover. Then, in the later episodes, when a pilot with a nearly identical appearance shows up, the dialogue insists that this is Sven who's found his way back. And this whole hospital planet is literally a running gag in animated shows because these kids' shows couldn't say the word dead. But Golion dealt with Shirogane's death as a statement because they are at war and war has a cost. The enemy is genuinely dangerous, and when Fala climbs into the Blue Lion after his death, it makes sense. It feels real because the grief behind it is real. Voltron, on the other hand, gets rid of that grief altogether, and instead we see Allura take over because coverage is needed until Sven can return. Nanny died saving someone she loved, you just never saw it. Hiss, the perpetually frustrated caretaker of Princess Fala, wasn't the most beloved character in the show, and neither is the American version known as Nanny. She's the authority figure who tells our princess that she can't pilot the lion, which inherently makes everyone's lives significantly harder, all in the name of royal protocol. She's a pain in the ass, but then she gets her moment. At least in Golion she does. In Golion, when Ribel is about to be shot, Hiss jumps in front of him and takes the bullet. This is a person who spent the entire series speedrunning being the most hated character, changing her ranking in our hearts because she doesn't even hesitate to die for the people she loves. And this kind of significant scene doesn't even make it to the screen in Voltron. Instead, Nanny survives, and the production team basically recycled stock footage of her into subsequent scenes to maintain her continuity. This might not seem like a big deal, but you gotta understand. When you see a character like this die on screen, the show feels lived in and mortal, right? There are stakes we can't ignore, and we as the audience grieve with the characters as well. But Voltron gives us none of that, because why would we want to give brutally honest moments like this to children? A young woman died by suicide. They said she went home. Having seen both shows, some of the cuts make sense, but some cuts kind of blindsided me. However, this cut, oh yeah, I knew from the moment I saw the Golion sequence that this wasn't showing up in Voltron. Let me explain. The Golion group finds a survivor from Earth's nuclear destruction. She learns the truth, and now she knows she has nothing to live for, and so, in a lot of sadness and pain, she steps off a cliff. The show acknowledges her with a grave at the site where she died. In Voltron, however, this character is renamed Twyla. She's not a survivor from Earth, she's from a separate liberated planet, and she's allowed to go home, so, we know everything's fine. This reversal feels like whiplash, which clearly points out the differences between the two shows. Most children's entertainment would take the route that Voltron took, but Golion pauses for a moment. We as adults know that not everyone can be saved, but Golion trusted their audience, regardless of their age, which is kind of a big ask. But that's what makes Golion, you know? Prince Lotor was doing something far worse than kidnapping. Prince Syncline, aka Lotor's Golion counterpart, is a genuinely disturbing character. In episode 21, we see that Syncline was completely obsessed with Princess Fala because she looked like his mother, a human woman from Altea. And the way he treated Princess Amue, Romel's counterpart in Golion? Yeah, nobody can understand that. That's sexual captivity through and through. So, by possessing Amue and being obsessed with Fala, we know exactly what's up with Syncline. Voltron obviously rewrote that bit. The lines were dropped, the shots were shortened, and as a result, we got Prince Lotor, who just wants the princess because she's a princess. The deeper pathology behind it is gone, and as a result, the character across the run loses his edge. When I saw Syncline on screen, I knew there was something truly messed up about him. Every time he showed up, I was scared for the characters because he's absolutely disturbing, and not even years of therapy could fix him. But Lotor, he's relentless, but he's also just kind of shallow. shallow. And you know, that big payoff in Golion, where we find that Honerva is actually Syncline's mother, only hit as hard as it did because throughout the show, we saw the ugly side of his obsession. In Voltron, we get basically none of that. Talk about taking a bite out of a character. Everyone was dying. The American version just told you they weren't. WEP had a content policy in place for sure. It wasn't applied scene by scene because we saw some of the battle scenes with cool action. However, if there was any scene that the board would feel uncomfortable with, WEP would cut it out first. Both Golion and Die Rugger 15 depicted war as it is. There were visual casualties, bloodbaths, and you could feel the consequences of the combat. We saw civilians die on screen and soldiers dying in ship explosions, hammering it into our heads that these shows have wars. But Voltron couldn't do that. Instead, the enemy combatants were designated machines. So basically every time a ship exploded, robots broke into 100 pieces, not a person. As a result, when you compare Voltron's battles to Golion's battles, they feel completely weightless. Because in this show, no one who truly mattered ever lost anything on screen. So the victories kind of feel unearned because what kind of war drama doesn't have losses, you know? Hagar used to be the Empress. In Voltron, Hagar is a witch. She brews the potion, and when pissed, she curses our hero. But in Golion, Honerva is Emperor Dai-Bazal's wife. Honerva was a scientist, brilliant, unhinged, and personally responsible for the creation of the Beastmen. She's not serving anyone. She's crazy in her own way. Through her, the show blurs the line between science and mythology, and then, of course, we find out that Honerva is Syncline's mother. So, overall, she is deeply connected to everything that's happening to our heroes and the villains in a way. So, by turning Honerva into Hagar, the henchwoman basically simplifies the character completely. And I mean, I like a nice villainess, so it sucks seeing a character like Honerva get completely diluted. The Galra Empire was rotting from the inside. Golion's Galra Empire is a visibly decaying empire. Emperor Dai-Bazal runs the country on fear and terror. The empire's own citizens suffer under the regime, and throughout the series, we get so many scenes depicting subjugated populations, starvation, and heavy-handed nods to the systematic rot that's taking place in the empire. There's no hiding the fact that the emperor is draining the empire dry. This is terrifying, but it also feels extremely real because we've seen this kind of empire in history. So, Golion isn't too far off, and say what you want, this kind of horror feels real, and it hits a lot harder than whatever Voltron was trying to do. Voltron did give us Planet Doom, where all the bad guys live, Zarkon is the leader who issues orders, and Lotor tries to execute them, but then messes up down the line. Hagar provides support with monsters, and that's pretty much it. It feels like a crime syndicate, but with no bite, no personality, because their whole focus is on defeating Voltron and nothing else. Golion's villains, on the other hand, have their own agenda. Defeating Golion would just make achieving those agendas a lot easier. Plus, we see Galra soldiers who show fatigue, commanders questioning authority, wondering if perpetual war is necessary in the first place, so in a way, the show argues against the fascism of the Empire as a whole. The conflict in Voltron continues because Zarkon just wants to keep fighting. Vehicle Voltron was actually a war tragedy. Nobody told you that either. Here's something most Voltron fans actually don't know. Vehicle Voltron and Lion Voltron have nothing to do with each other in Japan. Beast King Golion and Armored Fleet Die Rugger 15 are two completely separate Toei productions in different years with different characters, universes, and zero shared continuity. WEP licensed both and then connected the Galra and Drool empires in some ways. Die Rugger 15 is the source material for Vehicle Voltron, which is a structurally different kind of story from Golion. The Galveston Empire's home planet is dying, with the Van Allen radiation belt crumbling. The people are basically facing extinction, and their aggression is understandable. They're attacking Rugger Guard's exploration mission because their civilization is out of time and options. Desperate times lead to desperate actions, and this is a prime example of that. We also learn about the Galveston leadership, with hardliners who want continued conquest and moderates who believe that negotiation is possible, while the Reform faction thinks that the Emperor is an obstacle himself. That's why Emperor Corsair, whom we know as Emperor Zeppo, is assassinated by Hazar's people because they want freedom. Talk about about politics. The character of Teles, who is Hazar in the American version, was originally a Galveston commander who believes that peace between the two civilizations is achievable and is willing to work towards it despite the steep personal cost in the Japanese finale. He dies in Galveston because he wants to stay with his people, and Vehicle Voltron never achieved that because Voltron didn't want a morally complex tale. They wanted bad guys every week that would eventually be defeated by our heroes. So there you have it. This is what we missed out on, guys. The same story, but in different fonts. One where we get a weekly reset, new monsters to kill, and one that gives us a harrowing, politically complex story with real stakes and the real horrors of war unfiltered. Which one would you watch if you had to make the choice? As much as I love Voltron, it's kind of hard for me to pick the former. Let me know what you guys think though, and if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Otherwise, thanks for watching, stay safe out there, and we'll see ya in the next one. Bye for now.